Chapter 6. They left the main track, leading along the Navy Valley, and took a short cut through the mountains. They rode as quickly as the track would allow. It was narrow and winding, hugging fantastically shaped rocks covered in patches of colourful moss and lichen. They rode between vertical rocky cliffs from which ragged ribbons of cascades and waterfalls tumbled. They rode through ravines and gorges, across small rickety bridges, over precipices at the bottom of which streams seethed with white foam. The angular blade of Gorgon seemed to rear up directly above their heads. The peak of Devil Mountain was not visible, but shrouded in the clouds and fog cloaking the sky. The weather, as happens in the mountains, worsened in the course of a few hours. It began to drizzle, bitingly and disagreeably. When dusk fell, the three of them nervously and impatiently looked around for a shepherd's bothy, a tumble-down barn, or even a cave, anything that would protect them from the weather during the night. "I think it's stopped raining," Angoulême said hopefully. "It's only dripping from the holes in the roof now. Tomorrow, fortunately, we'll be near Belhaven, and we can always sleep in a shed or a barn on the outskirts."
"Aren't we entering the town?"
"Out of the question. Mounted strangers on horses are conspicuous, and Nightingale has plenty of informers in the town."
"We were thinking about using ourselves as bait."
"No," she interrupted. "That's a rotten plan. The fact that we're together will arouse suspicion. Nightingale's a cunning bastard, and news of my capture has certainly spread, and if anything alarms him, it'll also reach the half-elf."
"So, what do you suggest?"
"We skirt around the town from the east, from the mouth of the Sans-Retour Valley. There are ore mines there. I've a mate who works in one of them. We'll visit him. Who knows, with a bit of luck, the visit might prove profitable."
"Could you speak more plainly?"
"I'll tell you tomorrow. In the mine, so as not to jinx it." Caïr threw some birch branches on the fire. It had been raining all day, and no other fuel would have burned. But the birch, though wet, crackled a little and then flared up in a tall blue flame.
"Where are you from, Angoulême?"
"From Sintra, Witcher. It's a country by the sea, by the mouth of the Yaruga."
"I know where Sintra is."
"So why do you ask, if you know all that? Do I fascinate you so?"
"A little, let's say."
They fell silent. The fire crackled on. "My mother," Angoulême finally said, staring into the flame, "was a Cintran noblewoman, from a high-ranking family, I believe. The family had a sea cat in its coat of arms. I'd show it to you. I used to have a little medallion with that bloody sea cat on it from my mother, but I lost it at dice. That family, though, sod them and their sea cat, disowned me, because my mother was said to have slept with some churl, a stableman, I believe, and so I was a bastard, a disgrace, an ignominious stain on their honour. They gave me away to be raised by distant relatives. Admittedly, they didn't have a cat, dog, or any other fucker on their arms, but they weren't bad to me. They sent me to school and generally didn't beat me, though they reminded me pretty often who I was, a bastard conceived in the straw. My mother visited me maybe 3 or 4 times when I was small. Then she stopped, and to be honest, I didn't give a shit."
"How did you fall among criminals?"
"You sound like an examining magistrate," she snorted, contorting her face grotesquely. "Among criminals? Pshaw! Fallen from virtue! Huh." She grunted, rummaged around in her bosom, and took something out which the Witcher couldn't see clearly. "One-eyed Falco," she said indistinctly, rubbing something vigorously into her gum and inhaling. "Isn't a bad old fellow. He took what he took, but he left the powder. Want a pinch, Witcher?"
"No, I'd rather you didn't take it either."
"Why?"
"I just would."
"Caïr, I don't use fish stick." "Well, it's clear I've landed up with a couple of goody-goodies." She shook her head. "You'll probably start preaching that I'll go blind, deaf and bald from this stuff, I suppose, and give birth to a crippled child."
"Leave it, Angoulême, and finish the story."
The young woman sneezed loudly. "Very well, as you wish. Where was I? Ah, the war broke out, with Nilfgaard. My relatives lost everything, had to abandon their house. They had 3 children of their own, and I'd become a burden to them, so they gave me away to an orphanage. It was run by the priests of some temple or other. It was a jolly place as it happens. A bordello, a whorehouse, simple as that, for people who like their fruit tart and with white pips, get it? Young girls, and young boys too. So, when I joined them, I was too grown up, adult. There were no takers for me. Quite unexpectedly, she blushed with shame, visible even in the firelight. Well, almost none, she added through clenched teeth.
How old were you then?
15. I met one girl and 5 boys there, my age and a bit older, and we teamed up in no time. We knew, didn't we, the legends and tales about Mad Dea, about Blackbeard, about the Cassini brothers. We wanted to get out on the road, to taste freedom, to maraud. So what, we told ourselves, if they feed us twice a day? Does that give some lechers the right to screw us?
Language, Angoulême. Keep it in moderation.
The girl hawked noisily and spat into the campfire. Prig. Very well. I'll get to the point, because I don't feel like talking. We found knives in the orphanage kitchen. We just had to wet them well on a stone and strop them on a belt. We made some excellent clubs from the turned legs of an oaken chair. All we needed was horses and coin, so we waited for 2 perverts, regular customers, old buggers of, at least 40. They came, sat down, sipped wine and waited for the priests to tie the chosen kid to a special contraption, as was customary. But they didn't get their oats that day.
Angoulême.
All right. In short, we knifed and clubbed to death those 2 lecherous creeps, 3 priests and a page. The only one not to bolt, he was guarding the horses. We roasted the temple warden's souls until he changed his mind about giving us the key to the coffer. But we spared his life, because he was a nice old gaffer, always kind to us. And we took to the road to plunder. We had our ups and downs, won some, lost some. We gave and took some beatings. Full bellies, empty bellies. We're often empty. I've eaten everything that crawls, anything you can fucking catch, and things that fly. I even ate a child's kite once, because it was made of flour and water paste. She fell silent, then distractedly messed up her flaxen hair. What's past is past. I'll just say this. No one who escaped with me from the orphanage is still alive. The last 2, Owen and Abel, were dispatched a few days ago by Mr. Fulco's pikemen. Abel surrendered like me, but they stuck him anyway, even though he'd thrown down his sword. They spared me. Don't think it was out of the goodness of their hearts. They'd already spread-eagled me on a cloak, but an officer ran up and stopped this sport. And then you saved me from the scaffold. She was silent for a time. Witcher?
Yes.
I know how to express gratitude. So if you'd ever like to...
Excuse me?
I'll go and look over the horses, Kaya said hurriedly, and rose, wrapping himself in his cloak. I'll take a walk around the place. The girl sneezed, sniffed, and cleared her throat.
Not a word, Angoulême.
Geralt warned her, genuinely angry, genuinely confused, genuinely embarrassed.
Not another word.
She gave a slight cough again. Do you really not want me? Not even a bit?
You've already tasted Milver's strap, little punk. If you're not quiet this instant, you'll get a second helping.
I won't say another thing.
Good girl.
Pits and holes, shored up and lined with planks, connected by footbridges, ladders and scaffolding, gaped in a hillside covered in misshapen and twisted pine trees. Catwalks supported by criss-crossed posts protruded from the holes. People were busily pushing carts and wheelbarrows along some of the catwalks. The contents of the carts and wheelbarrows, which at first sight seemed to be dirty, stony soil, were being tipped from the catwalks into a great quadrangular trough, or rather a complex of increasingly small troughs divided up by shutters. Water, supplied from a forested hillock along gutters supported on low trestles, gushed through them, and yet more channeled it away down towards a cliff. Angoulême dismounted and indicated to Geralt and Caïr to do likewise. Leaving their mounts by a fence, They headed towards the buildings, wading through mud beside the leaking gutters and pipes. "It's an iron ore washing plant," Angoulême said, pointing at the equipment. "The ore is carted out of those mine shafts, tipped into the troughs and rinsed with water from the stream. The ore settles on the sifter, and it's taken from there. There are tons of mines and washing plants around Belhaven, and the ore is carted down the valley to Mag Turger, where there are bloomeries and forges, because there are more forests there, and you need wood for smelting."
"Thanks for the lesson."
Geralt cut her off sourly.
"I've seen a few mines in my lifetime. I know what's needed for smelting. Why have we come here?"
"To have a chat with one of my mates, the foreman here. Follow me." "Ah, I can see him, over there, outside the joiner's shop. Let's go."
"You mean that dwarf?"
"Yeah, he's called Golan Drotstek. As I said, he's—"
"The foreman here, you said. You didn't say, though, what you want to chat with him about."
"Look at your boots." Geralt and Caer obediently examined their footwear, which was covered in sludge of a strange reddish hue. "The half-elf we're seeking," Angoulême anticipated the question, "had the same crimson mud on his shoes when he was talking to Nightingale. Get it?"
"I do now. And the dwarf?"
"Don't say a word to him. I'll do the talking. He should take you for types that don't talk, just cleave. Look tough." They didn't have to make a special effort. Some of the miners who were watching quickly looked away, others froze with mouths open. The ones in their way hurriedly stood aside. Geralt guessed why. He and Caer still had visible bruises, cuts and swellings, vivid tokens of their fight and the hiding Milva had given them. They looked like types who took pleasure from punching each other in the face and wouldn't need much persuasion to punch someone else. The dwarf, Angoulême's mate, was standing outside a building bearing the sign Joinery Shop and painting something on a board made of two planed staves. He saw them coming, put down his brush and tin of paint and scowled. Then an expression of utter amazement suddenly appeared behind his paint-spattered beard.
"Angoulême?
What cheer, Drotstek?"
Is it you?"
The dwarf's hairy jaw fell open.
"Is it really you?"
"No, it isn't. It's the freshly resurrected prophet Lebioda. Ask me another, Golan, a more intelligent one, perhaps."
"Don't mock, flaxen hair. I never expected to see you again. Mullica were here 5 days since. He says they nabbed you and stuck you on a stake in Rita Bruna. He vowed it were true."
"Everything has its benefits." The girl shrugged. "Next time Mullica borrows some money and vows he'll pay it back, you'll know what his vow's worth."
"I knew that before,"
the dwarf replied, blinking quickly and twitching his nose like a rabbit.
"I wouldn't lend him a broken farthing, even if he bent down and licked my boots. But you're alive and kicking. I'm glad. Eh? Perhaps you'll pay back your debt too, eh?"
"Perhaps. Who knows?"
"And who have you got with you, eh, flaxen hair?"
"Sound fellows."
"Righto, mates. And where are the gods leading you?"
"Astray, as usual." Angoulême, unconcerned by the witcher looking daggers at her, sniffed up a pinch of fish-tech, rubbing the rest into her gum. "Fancy a snort, Golan?"
"I should see."
The dwarf took and inhaled a pinch of the narcotic. "Truth be told," the girl continued, "I'm thinking about going to Belhaven. You don't know if Nightingale and his hands are hanging around somewhere there." Golan Drotstek cocked his head.
"You, flaxen hair, should stay out of Nightingale's way. He's as pissed off with you, they say, as a wolverine roused from his winter sleep."
"Blow that. And when the news reached him that I'd been spitted on a palisade by a 2-horse team, didn't his heart change? Didn't he regret it? Didn't he shed a tear, foul his beard with snot?"
"Not at all. I heard he said Angoulême's finally got what she had coming to her, a stake up the arse."
"Oh, the boor. Vulgar, loutish chump. Prefect Falco would call him the arse end of society. To me, he's what comes out of the arse."
"You will be better off, flaxen hair, saying things like that out of his earshot, and not hanging around Belhaven. Give it a wide berth. And if you have to enter the town, better go in disguise."
"Hey, Golan, don't teach your grandmother to suck eggs."
"Wouldn't dream of it."
"Then listen, dwarf." Angoulême rested a boot on a step leading to the joinery shop. "I'll ask you a question. Don't hurry with the answer. Think it over well."
"Ask away."
"A half-elf hasn't caught your eye recently, by any chance? A stranger? Not from round here?
Golan Drotchtek breathed in, sneezed loudly, and wiped his nose on his wrist. A half-elf, you say? What half-elf?
Don't play the fool, Drotchtek. The one who hired Nightingale for a contract. A contract killing. Of a witcher.
A witcher?
Golan Drotchtek laughed, picking his board up from the ground.
Well, I never. Believe it or not, we're looking for a witcher. Look, we're painting signs and putting them all up around here. See? Witcher wanted. Decent pay, board and lodgings included. Particulars at the office of the Petite Babette ore mine. How's it spelt anyway? Particulars or particulars?
Just paint it out and write details. What do you need a witcher at the mine for?
Now she's asking. Monsters, of course.
Like what?
Vespertills and Barbagazzis. They're running rampant in the lower galleries.
Angoulême glanced at Geralt, who nodded to confirm he knew what that was about, and coughed meaningfully to signal that she ought to get back to the subject. Getting back to the subject, the girl understood at once. What do you know about that half-elf?
I don't know nothing about a half-elf.
I told you to think it over well.
So I did.
Golan Drotchtek suddenly assumed a sly expression.
And I decided it doesn't pay to know anything about this case.
Meaning?
Meaning it's shaky here. The ground's shaky, and the times are shaky. Gangs, Nilfgaardians, partisans from the free slopes, and diverse foreign elements, half-elves, each one raring to commit assault.
Meaning? Angoulême wrinkled her nose.
Meaning you owe me money, Flaxen Hair, and rather than pay it back, you're getting deeper into debt. Serious debt, because you might get a whack on the head for what you're asking, and not with a bare hand, but an axe. What kind of business is that for me? Will it pay if I do know something about the half-elf, eh? Will I get anything out of it? Or if it's only risk and no profit?
Geralt had had enough. The conversation was boring him, the jargon and the dwarf's mannerisms annoying him. As quick as lightning, he caught the dwarf by the beard, yanked down and pushed him over. Golan Drotchtek tripped over the can of paint and fell. The witcher leapt on him, pressed his knee against his chest, and flashed a knife in front of his eyes.
You may profit, he growled, by escaping with your life. Talk.
Golan's eyes looked as though they would pop out of their sockets and go for a stroll.
Talk, Geralt repeated. Tell us what you know. Otherwise, when I slash your throat open, you'll drown before you bleed to death. The Rialto, the dwarf stammered. The Rialto bit.
The Rialto mine didn't differ very much from the Petite Babette mine, or from the other mines and quarries that Angoulême, Geralt and Caïr had passed on the way, which were called Autumn Manifest, Old Mine, New Mine, Juliet Mine, Celestine, Common Cause, and Lucky Pit. Work was in full swing in all of them, soil and ore being carted out of every shaft and pit to be tipped onto a sluice and washed in the sifters. There was an abundance of the characteristic red mud in all of them. Rialto was a large mine located near the top of the hill. The crown had been sliced away and formed a quarry. The actual washing station was located on a terrace carved out of the hillside. Here, at the foot of a vertical wall, in which shafts and drifts gaped, was a sluice, sifters, gutters, and other mining paraphernalia. There was also a veritable village of wooden huts, sheds, shacks, and hovels covered in bark. "I don't know anyone here," said the girl, tying her reins to the fence. "But let's try and talk to the overseer. Geralt, if you could, maybe don't seize him by the throat immediately, or threaten him with a shiv. First we'll talk."
"Don't teach your grandmother to suck eggs, Angoulême."
They didn't get as far as talking. They didn't even reach the building where they suspected the overseer had his office. They ran straight into 5 horsemen in the square, where the ore was being loaded onto wagons.
"Oh, shit," said Angoulême. "Oh, shit, look what the cat dragged in." "What's up?"
"They're Nightingale's men, here to extort protection money, and they've recognised me. Damn it! Now we're in the shit."
"Can't you lie our way out of it?" Caïr muttered.
"I wouldn't count on it."
"Why?"
"I skinned Nightingale when I escaped from the Hansa. They won't forgive me for that. But I'll try. Be quiet. Keep your eyes open and stay alert for anything.
The horsemen rode up, with two of them at the head, a fellow with long grizzly hair wearing a wolfskin, and a young beanpole with a beard, clearly grown to cover acne scars. They feigned indifference, but Geralt noticed veiled flashes of hatred in the glances they were casting at Angoulême. "Flaxen here!"
Novosad? Geralt? Greetings. Nice out today. Pity about the rain.
The grizzly-haired man dismounted, or rather leapt down from the saddle, briskly swinging his right leg over his horse's head. The others also dismounted. Grizzled Hair handed his reins to Geralt, the beanpole with the beard, and came closer. "Well, well," he said, "our big-mouthed little magpie. Looks like you're alive and well."
Alive and kicking?
"You brazen little upstart. There was a rumour you were kicking, but on a stake. Rumour has it one-eyed Falco caught you. Rumour has it you sang like a bird when you were tortured, told them everything they asked."
Rumour has it, Angoulême snapped, that your mother only charged her customers 4 shillings, but no one would give her more than 2.
The brigand spat at her feet contemptuously. Angoulême hissed again, just like a cat.
"Listen, Novosad," she said insolently, arms akimbo. "I need to talk something over with Nightingale."
"Interesting. Likewise he with you."
"Shut your trap and listen, while I still feel like talking. 2 days ago, a mile outside Riedbrunne, me and these companions of mine slaughtered that witcher the contract out for. Get it?"
Novosad glanced knowingly at his comrades, and then pulled up his sleeves, scrutinizing Geralt and Ciri. "Your new companions," he drawled. "Ha! I see from their faces they're no choir boys. They killed the witcher, you say? How? A stab in the back? Or in their dreams?"
"That's a minor particular." Angoulême grimaced like a little monkey. "The major particular is that the witcher is 6 feet under. Listen, Novosad, I don't want to quarrel with Nightingale or get in his way, but a deal's a deal. The half-elf gave you an advance on the contract, so I shan't demand it. That's your money for costs and for your trouble. But the second instalment, which the half-elf promised after the job was done, that's mine by right."
"By right?"
"Yes."
Angoulême ignored his sarcastic tone.
"We carried out the contract and killed the witcher, proof of which we can show the half-elf. Then I'll take what's mine and head off into the sunset. I don't mean to compete with Nightingale, because the slopes aren't big enough for the both of us. Tell him that, Novosad."
"Is that all?"
Stinging sarcasm again. "And a kiss." Angoulême snorted. "You can hold your arse out on my behalf, per procura."
"I've a better idea," Novosad declared, glancing at his companions. "I'll drag your arse to him, Angoulême. I'll deliver you to him in fetters, and then he'll discuss and straighten everything out with you, and settle up everything. The question is who owns the money from the half-elf Skiru's contract, and your repayment for what you stole, and that the slopes aren't big enough for all of us. Everything will be sorted out the same way in fine detail."
"There's one snag." Angoulême lowered her hands. "How do you plan to take me to Nightingale, Novosad?"
"Like this." The brigand held out a hand. "By the neck." Geralt's sail was out in a flash and under Novosad's nose. "I advise against it," he snarled. Novosad sprang back, drawing his sword. Geralt drew a curved saber with a hiss from the scabbard on his back. The others followed their example. "I still advise against it," the witcher said. Novosad swore. His eyes swept over his comrades. Arithmetic wasn't his strong point, but he calculated that 5 was considerably more than 3. "Get 'em!" he yelled, lunging at Geralt. "Kill 'em!" The witcher evaded the blow with a half-turn and slashed him viciously across the temple. Even before Novosad had fallen, Angoulême ducked forward with a short jab. Her knife whistled in the air, and Geralt reeled away, the bone handle jutting from beneath his chin. The brigand dropped his saber and jerked the knife from his throat with both hands spurting blood, but Angoulême sprang up to kick him in the chest and knocked him to the ground. Meanwhile, Geralt had struck another bandit. Ciri hacked the next one to death. Something shaped like a slice of watermelon dropped from the robber's skull after a powerful blow of his Nilfgaardian blade. The last thug fled and jumped onto his horse. Ciri tossed up his sword, seized it by the blade, and hurled it like a javelin, striking the brigand right between the shoulder blades.
The horse neighed and jerked its head, sat hard on its haunches, and stamped its hooves, dragging the corpse over the red mud, its hand tangled up in the reins. The whole thing took less than 5 heartbeats. "Hey!" yelled somebody from among the buildings. "Help! Help! Murder! Vicious killers!" "Troops! Call out the troops!" shouted another miner, shooing away children who, as is the immemorial custom of all the world's children, had appeared from nowhere to watch and get in the way. "Someone run and call the army!" Angoulême picked up her knife, wiped and sheathed it. "Let them run by all means," she shouted back, looking around. "What is it, quarrymen? Are you blind or what? That was self-defense. They fell on us, the bloody thugs. Don't you know them? Haven't they done you enough harm? Haven't they extorted enough from you?" She sneezed loudly. Then she tore the purse from the belt of the still twitching novicad and leaned over Geralt. "Angoulême." "What?" "Leave it." "Why should I? It spoils. Short of money." "Angoulême." "You!" A voice suddenly shouted. "This way, please." 3 men stood in the open doorway to a barrack serving as the tool store. 2 of them were heavies with low foreheads and closely cropped hair, of undoubtedly limited intelligence. The third, the one who'd shouted to them, was a very tall, dark-haired, handsome man. "I couldn't help overhearing the conversation preceding the incident," the man said. "I found it hard to believe you'd killed a witcher, thinking it empty bragging. I don't think that now. Step inside." Angoulême drew an audible intake of breath. She glanced at the witcher and nodded barely perceptibly. The man was a half-elf. The half-elf Ciri was tall, well over 6 feet. He wore his dark hair tied on his neck in a ponytail falling down his back. His mixed blood was betrayed by his eyes, which were large, almond-shaped, and yellowish-green like a cat's. "So, you killed the witcher," he said again, smiling repulsively. "Forestalling Homestragan, also called Nightingale? Fascinating, fascinating. Put simply, I ought to pay you 50 florins, the second installment, which means Stragan received his 210 florins for nothing, for you surely can't suppose he'll give it up." "How I settle accounts with Nightingale is my business," said Angoulême, sitting on a crate and swinging her legs. "The contract on the Witcher was a one-off commission, and we carried out that commission. We did, not Nightingale. The Witcher's in the ground. His company, all 3 of them, are in the ground. In other words, job done." "At least that's what you claim. How did it happen?" Angoulême kept swinging her legs. "I'll write my life story when I'm old," she declared in her usual impudent tone. "I'll describe how this, that, and the other took place. You'll have to hold on till then, Mr. Ciri." "It shames you that much, then," the half-breed remarked coldly. "So you did the deed foully and treacherously." "Does that bother you?" Geralt asked. Ciri looked at him intently. "No," he answered after a moment. "Geralt, the Witcher of Rivia, didn't deserve a better fate. He was a simpleton and a fool. If he'd had a finer, more honest and honourable death, legends would have sprung up around him. But he didn't merit a legend." "Death is always the same." "Not always." The half-elf turned his head, trying to catch a glimpse of Geralt's eyes, shaded by his hood. "Not always, I assure you. I presume you dealt the mortal blow." Geralt didn't reply. He felt the overwhelming urge to grab the crossbreed by the ponytail, knock him to the floor, and wring every detail out of him, knocking his teeth out one by one with his sword pommel. He held himself back. Good sense suggested Angoulême's hoax might bear better results. "As you wish," said Ciri, not getting an answer. "I won't insist on the report about the course of events. It's clearly difficult for you to talk about it, and there's clearly not very much to boast about. Supposing, of course, that your silence doesn't stem from something quite different. For example, that nothing at all occurred. Do you perhaps have any proof of the veracity of your words?" "We cut off the witch's right hand," Angoulême replied impassively. "But later a raccoon took it and devoured it." "So we have only this." Geralt slowly unbuttoned his shirt and drew out his medallion with the wolf's head.
The Witcher wore it around his neck.
May I? Geralt didn't hesitate for long. The half-elf hefted the medallion in his palm. Now, I believe, he said slowly, the gewgaw emanates powerful magic. Only a witcher could have had something like this. And the witcher, Angoulême continued, wouldn't have let it be taken from him while he was still breathing. It's rock-solid evidence, so slap the cash on the table, maester. Skirou carefully put the medallion away, took a wad of papers from his bosom, put them down on the table and spread them out with a hand. Over here, please. Angoulême hopped off the crate and walked over, mocking him and swinging her hips. She leaned over the table. As quick as a flash, Skirou grabbed her hair, slammed her down on the table, and shoved a knife to her throat. The girl didn't even have time to cry out. Geralt and Caer already had their swords in their hands, but it was too late. The half-elf's assistants, the muscle men with low foreheads, were holding iron hooks, but they were in no hurry to come closer. Drop your swords, Skirou snarled. Both of you. Swords on the floor, or I'll widen the slut's smile. Don't listen, Angoulême began, and ended with a shriek as the half-elf ground his fist into her hair and scored her skin with a dagger. A glistening, red, wavy line trickled down the girl's neck. Swords on the ground. I'm serious. Perhaps we could talk this out. Geralt, heedless of the rage seething inside him, decided to stall for time. Like civilized folk. The half-elf laughed venomously. Talk it out. With you, Witcher? I was sent here to finish you off, not talk. Yes, freak. You were lying, putting on a song and dance, but I recognized you the moment I saw you. You'd been described precisely to me. Can you guess who described you so precisely? Who gave me precise instructions about where and in what company I'd find you? Oh, I'm certain you've guessed. Release the girl. But I don't just know you from the description, Skirou continued, with no intention of releasing Angoulême. I've seen you before. I even tracked you once, in Temeria, in July. I followed you on horseback to the town of Dorian and to the chambers of the jurists Codringer and Fenn. Ring any bells? Geralt twisted his sword so that the blade flashed in the half-elf's eyes. I wonder, he said icily, how you mean to get out of this stalemate, Skirou. I see two solutions. The first, you let go of the girl right away. The second, you kill the girl, and a second later your blood paints the walls and ceiling a pretty red. Your weapons! Skirou brutally yanked Angoulême's hair. Will be lying on the ground before I count to 3. Then I start butchering the slut. We'll see how much you manage to cut off. Not much, I reckon. 1, 2. Geralt had begun his own reckoning, whirling the scythe in a hissing moulinet. The thudding of hooves, the neighing and snorting of horses, and yelling reached them from outside. And what now? Skirou laughed. That's what I was waiting for. It's not stalemate, but checkmate. My friends have arrived. Really? Said Caer, looking out through the window. I see the uniforms of the Imperial Light Horse. Checkmate indeed, but against you, said Geralt. You lose, Skirou. Release the girl. Like hell. The barrack doors yielded to kicks, and about a dozen men entered, most of them in identical black uniforms. They were led by a fair-haired, bearded man with a silver bear on his spalder. Quit Ian's witches, he asked menacingly. What's going on here? Who answers for this brawl? For the bodies in the yard, speak up this minute. Commander, Gladivian Vort, drop your swords. They obeyed, for crossbows and arbalests were being aimed at them. Released by Skirou, Angoulême meant to spring up from the table, but suddenly found herself in the grasp of a stocky, colourfully dressed bruiser with bulging frog eyes. She tried to cry out, but the bruiser clamped a gloved fist over her mouth. Let's abstain from violence, Geralt suggested coolly to the commander with the bear. We aren't criminals. Well, I never. We're acting with the knowledge and permission of Mr. Fulco Artevelde, the prefect of Riedbrunner. Well, I never, repeated the bear, signalling for Geralt and Caer's swords to be picked up and confiscated. With the knowledge and permission of Mr. Fulco Artevelde,
The esteemed Mr. Artevelde, hear that, lads? His men, those dressed in the black and colourful clothes, cackled in unison. Angoulême struggled in the grip of Frog Eyes, vainly trying to scream. Needlessly, Geralt already knew. Even before the smiling Skirru began to shake the hand proffered to him, even before the 4 black-uniformed Nilfgaardians seized Caer and 3 others aimed their crossbows straight at his face. Frog Eyes pushed Angoulême into the arms of his comrades. The girl sagged in their grasp like a rag doll. She didn't even try to offer any resistance. The bear walked slowly over to Geralt and suddenly slammed him in the crotch with his armoured-gloved fist. Geralt bent over but didn't fall. Cold fury kept him on his feet. "Then the news that you aren't the first asses to be used by one-eyed Fulka for his own purposes may console you," said the bear. "Profitable business deals, like the one I'm carrying out here with Mr. Homer Stragan, known by some as Nightingale, are a thorn in his side. It pisses Fulko off that I've recruited Homer Stragan into the Imperial service and appointed him commander of the Volunteer Mines Defense Company to expedite those deals. Unable thus to avenge himself officially, he hires a variety of rogues." "And witches," a smiling Skirru interjected scathingly. "Outside," said the bear loudly, 5 bodies are getting soaked in the rain. You murdered men in the Imperial service. You disrupted the work of this mine. I have no doubt about it. You're spies, saboteurs, and terrorists. Martial law applies here. I hereby summarily sentence you to death." Frog Eyes cackled. He walked over to Angoulême, who was being held up by the bandits, grasped one of her breasts and squeezed it hard.
"Well then, flaxen hair,"
he croaked, and it transpired that his voice was more frog-like than his eyes. His bandit sobriquet, assuming he'd christened himself with it, showed a sense of humour. But if it was an alias intended to disguise, it was extremely effective.
"We meet again, then,"
the frog-like nightingale croaked, pinching Angoulême in the breast.
"Happy?"
The girl groaned in pain.
"Where are the pearls and stones you stole from me, you whore?"
"One-eyed Fulko took them for safekeeping," Angoulême yelled, ineffectually pretending that she wasn't afraid. "Go and claim them back." Nightingale croaked and goggled his eyes. Now he looked like a genuine frog, which any moment would start catching flies with its tongue. He pinched Angoulême even harder. She struggled and groaned even more pathetically. Through the red fog of fury covering Geralt's eyes, the girl had once again begun to resemble Ciri. "Take them," the bear ordered impatiently. "To the yard with them." "He's a witcher," said one of the bandits from Nightingale's Mines Defense Company hesitantly. "He's a hard case. How can we take him with our bare hands? He's liable to cast a charm on us or something else." "No fear." A smiling Skirru patted his pocket. "Without his witch's amulet, he's unable to work magic, and I have it. Take him." There were more armed Nilfgaardians in black cloaks in the yard, and more of Nightingale's colourful hassa. A clutch of miners had also gathered. The ubiquitous children and dogs were also milling around. Nightingale suddenly lost control of himself, quite as though a devil had possessed him. Croaking furiously, he punched Angoulême, and when she fell, kicked her repeatedly. Geralt strained in the grip of the bandits and was hit on the back of the neck with something hard for his pains.
"They said,"
croaked Nightingale, hopping over Angoulême like a frantic toad,
"that you'd had a stake shoved up your backside in Reed Bruna, you little strumpet. You were destined for the stake then, and you'll expire on the stake today. Boys, find a post and sharpen it to a spike. Look lively."
"Mr. Stragan," the bear grimaced, "I see no reason to indulge in such a time-consuming and bestial execution. The prisoners ought simply to be hanged." He fell silent under the evil gaze of the frog-like eyes.
"Be quiet, Captain," croaked the bandit. "I pay you too much for you to make improper remarks. I promised Angoulême a foul death, and now I'm going to deliver it. Hang those 2 if you must. I'm not bothered about them."
"But I am," Skirru interrupted. "I need them both, especially the Witcher, especially him. And since skewering the girl will take some time, I shall make use of it." He walked over
and fixed his feline eyes on Geralt. "You ought to know, freak," he said, "that it was I that dispatched your comrade, Codringer, in Dorian. I did it on the orders of my lord, Master Vilgefortz, whom I've served for many years, but I did it with immense pleasure." The old rogue, Codringer, the half-elf continued, without getting a reaction, had the audacity to stick his nose into Master Vilgefortz's affairs. I got at him with a knife, and I torched that loathsome monstrosity Fen among his papers and roasted him alive. I could have simply stabbed him, but I devoted a little time and effort to listen to his howling and squealing. And howl and squeal he did, I swear, like a stuck piglet. There was nothing, absolutely nothing human in that howling. Do you know why I'm telling you all this? Because I could also simply knife you or order you stabbed to death. But I shall put in a little time and effort, and listen as you howl. You said death is always the same? You'll soon see it isn't. Hey, boys, heat up some pitch in the tar kettle and fetch a chain. Something smashed against the corner of the barracks and exploded with a red flash and a frightful crash. A second vessel containing petroleum, Geralt recognized it by the smell, landed plumb in the tar kettle, and a third shattered just beside the men restraining the horses. It boomed and belched fire, and the horses fell into a frenzy. There was a turmoil, and from it rushed a howling dog in flames. One of Nightingale's bandits suddenly spread his arms and keeled over in the mud, with an arrow in his back. "Long live the free slopes!" Figures in grey mantles and fur hats loomed at the top of the hill on the scaffoldings and the catwalks. More missiles, trailing wakes of flames and smoke behind them like fireworks, fell onto the people, horses, and mine buildings. 2 flew into the workshop, onto the floor strewn with shavings and sawdust. "Long live the free slopes! Death to the Nilfgaardian invaders!" Arrow fletchings and crossbow bolts sang. One of the black-uniformed Nilfgaardians tumbled down under his horse. One of Nightingale's bandits fell with his throat pierced, and one of the close-cropped muscle men dropped with a bolt in his nape. The bear sprawled with a ghastly groan. An arrow had hit him in the chest, under the sternum, beneath the gorget. The arrow had been stolen, though no one could have known that, from a military convoy and was standard issue of the Imperial Army, slightly adapted. The wide, 2-bladed arrowhead had been filed in several places with the aim of fragmentation. The arrowhead fragmented beautifully in the bear's guts. "Down with the tyrant Emir! The free slopes!" Nightingale croaked, grabbing his arm grazed by a bolt. One of the children rolled over in the mud, pierced through by an arrow from one of the less accurate freedom fighters. One of the men holding Geralt dropped. One of the men holding Angoulême fell over. The girl wrested herself free of the second, drew a knife from her boot in an instant, swung hard and slashed. In her frenzy, she missed Nightingale's throat, but mutilated his cheek splendidly, almost down to the teeth. Nightingale croaked more gratingly than usual, and his eyes bulged more bulgingly. He slumped to his knees, blood spurting between hands, clutching his face. Angoulême gave an unearthly scream and leapt forward to finish the job, but couldn't, for another bomb exploded between her and Nightingale, belching fire and clouds of foul-smelling smoke. Fire roared all around, and a fiery pandemonium raged. Horses thrashed, whinnied, and kicked. The bandits and Nilfgaardians yelled. The miners ran in a panic. Some fled, and others tried to put out the blazing buildings. Geralt had managed to pick up his sail, which the bear had released. He jabbed it into the forehead of a tall woman in a chainmail vest, who was aiming a blow at Angoulême with a morning star as she rose to her feet. He sliced open the thigh of a black-uniformed Nilfgaardian, running at him with a half-pike. He then slashed the throat of the next one, who simply happened to be in the way. Right alongside him, a frantic, scorched horse, rushing blindly, knocked over and trampled another child. "Seize the horse! Seize the horse!" Cair was now right beside him, and created room for them both with great swings of his sword. Geralt wasn't listening or looking. He slew another Nilfgaardian. He looked around for Skiru. Angoulême, on bended knee, shot a crossbow she'd picked up, sending the bolt, at a distance of 3 paces, into the belly of a bandit from the mine's defense company who was coming for her. Then she sprang to her feet and hung onto the bridle of a horse running by. "Grab one of them, Geralt!" Cair yelled. "And ride!" The Witcher slit open another Nilfgaardian from breastbone to hip with a downward stroke. He shook blood from his eyebrows and eyelashes with a sharp jerk of his head. "Skiru! Where are you bastard?" A stroke, a cry, warm drops on his face. "Mercy!" howled a lad in a black uniform, kneeling in the mud. The Witcher hesitated. "Wake up!" yelled Cair, grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him hard. "Control yourself. Are you in a frenzy?" Angoulême was returning at a gallop, dragging another horse by the reins. She was being followed by 2 riders. One of them fell, hit by the arrow of a fighter for the freedom of the slopes. The other was hurled from the saddle by Cair's sword. Geralt leapt into the saddle. And then he saw Skiru in the light of the blaze, summoning the panicked Nilfgaardians to himself. Beside the half-elf, Nightingale, croaking and bawling out curses with his bloody maw, looked like a veritable cannibal troll. Geralt roared furiously, reined his horse around, and whirled his sword. Beside him, Cair shouted and swore, wobbling in the saddle, blood from his forehead pouring over his eyes and face. "Geralt! Help me!" Skiru had gathered a group around him, and was yelling and ordering them to shoot their crossbows. Geralt slapped his horse on the rump with the flat of his sword, ready for a suicidal charge. Skiru had to die. Nothing else meant anything, or mattered. Cair meant nothing. Angoulême meant nothing. "Geralt!" Angoulême yelled. "Help Cair!" He came to his senses, and was ashamed. Geralt held Cair up, supported him. Cair wiped his eyes with a sleeve, and the blood instantly poured over them again. "It's nothing. A scratch." His voice shook. "Ride, Witcher. Follow Angoulême. Ride." From the foot of the mountain came a great cry, and a crowd armed with picks, crowbars, and axes came rushing out. For miners from the neighbouring mines of Common Cause and Lucky Pit were hurrying to help their mates and comrades from the Rialto colliery, or from some other. Who could possibly know? Geralt kicked his horse with his heels. They rode at a gallop, recklessly, ventre à terre. They pounded on, not looking back, hugging their horses' necks. Angoulême had landed the best horse, a small but fleet and sturdy bandit steed. Geralt's horse, a bay with Nilfgaardian trappings, was beginning to snort and wheeze, and was having difficulty holding its head up. Cair's horse, also an army beast, was stronger and tougher, but what of that when its rider was causing problems, swaying in the saddle, mechanically clenching with his thighs and bleeding profusely onto his mount's mane and neck. But they galloped on. Angoulême, who had pulled ahead, was waiting for them on a bend, in a place where the road went downhill, winding amongst rocks. "Our pursuers," she panted, smearing dirt on her face, "will come after us. They won't give up. The miners saw which way we fled. We oughtn't to stay on the highway. We have to head into the forests, get off the road, lose them." "No," the Witcher protested, anxiously listening to the sounds coming from the horse's lungs. "We must stay on the highway. Take the straightest and shortest route to Sans Retour." "Why?" "There's no time to talk. Let's ride. Squeeze what you can from the horses." They galloped on. The Witcher's bay wheezed. The bay wasn't fit to ride any further. It was barely walking, legs as stiff as boards, panting hard, the air escaping from it in a hoarse wheezing. It finally fell over on its side, kicked stiffly, looked at its rider, and there was reproach in its cloudy eye. Cair's horse was in somewhat better shape, but Cair's condition was worse. He simply fell from the saddle, raised himself, but only onto his hands and knees, and retched spasmodically, though his stomach was empty. When Geralt and Angoulême tried to touch his bloodied head, he screamed. "Damn it," said the girl. "It's quite a haircut they've given him." The skin of the young Nilfgaardian's forehead and temple, along with the hair, was detached from the skull along a considerable length. Were it not for the fact that the blood had formed a sticky clot, the loose patch would probably have fallen off all the way to his ear. It was a gruesome sight. "How did that happen?" "They threw a hatchet right at him. To make it even funnier, it wasn't an elf guardian, nor any of Nightingale's men, but one of the quarrymen.
Doesn't matter who threw it. The Witcher bound Kair's head tightly with a torn-off shirt sleeve. It matters, luckily, that he was a poor shot, and that he just scalped him rather than smashing his skull in. But Kair took a hefty whack in the pate, and the brain felt it too. He won't stay upright in the saddle, even if the horse could bear his weight.
What shall we do then? Your horse has died, his is almost dead, and the sweat's dropping off mine. And they're on our trail. We can't stay here.
We have to stay here. Me and Kair's horse. You ride on, hard. Your horse is strong, it can withstand the gallop, and even were you to exhaust it. Angoulême, somewhere in Sans Retour Valley, Regis, Milva and Dandelion are waiting for us. They don't know anything of this, and may fall into Skiru's clutches. You have to find them and warn them, and then all four of you must ride as fast as you can to Toussaint. You won't be followed there, I hope.
What about you and Kair?
Angoulême bit her lip.
What will happen to you? Nightingale isn't stupid. When he sees a half-dead, riderless horse, he'll rake over every hollow in the region, and you won't get far with Kair.
Skiru, for he's the one pursuing us, will follow your trail.
Do you think so?
I'm certain. Go.
What will Auntie say when I show up without you?
You'll explain, but not to Milva, to Regis. Regis will know what's to be done, and when Kair's mop dries a bit harder onto his pate, we'll make for Toussaint. We'll meet up there somehow. Very well, don't dally. Get on your horse and ride. Don't let our pursuers get any closer. Don't let them hunt you by sight.
Don't teach your grandmother to suck eggs. Look after yourselves. Farewell.
Farewell, Angoulême.
He didn't move too far from the road. He couldn't deny himself a glance at their pursuers. And in fact, he didn't fear any trouble from them, knowing they wouldn't waste time and would pursue Angoulême. He wasn't mistaken. The riders who thundered into the pass less than a quarter of an hour later stopped, admittedly, at the sight of the dead horse, shouted, argued, trotted around the roadside bushes, but returned almost at once to the road to resume their pursuit. They clearly believed that two of the three fugitives were now riding one horse, and it would be possible to catch them quickly if they didn't dawdle. Geralt saw that some of the pursuing horses weren't in the best of shape either. There weren't too many black cloaks of the Nilfgaardian light horse among them. Nightingale's colourful brigands predominated. Geralt couldn't see if Nightingale himself was taking part in the hunt, or if he'd stayed behind to treat his mutilated face. When the hoofbeats of the vanishing pursuers had faded away, Geralt stood up from his hiding place in the bracken, lifted and held up the moaning and groaning Kair. The horse is too feeble to bear you. Will you be able to walk? The Nilfgaardian made a noise which might as easily have been agreement or disagreement, or something else. But he shuffled forward, and that was the main idea. They went down to the stream bed in the ravine. Kair negotiated the final few yards of the slippery slope in a rather chaotic descent. He crawled to the stream, drank, and poured the icy water copiously over the bandage on his head. The Witcher didn't hurry him. He was breathing heavily himself, gathering his strength. He walked upstream, supporting Kair and pulling the horse at the same time, wading in the water and stumbling on pebbles and fallen tree trunks. After some time, Kair stopped cooperating, stopped shuffling his legs obediently. In fact, he stopped moving them at all, so the Witcher simply dragged him. It was impossible to continue like that, particularly since the stream bed was obstructed by rocks and waterfalls. Geralt grunted and lifted the wounded man onto his back. Neither did pulling the horse make life any easier. When they finally emerged from the ravine, the Witcher simply collapsed on the wet forest floor and lay, panting, completely drained, beside the groaning Kair. He lay there for a long time. His knee had begun to throb again with intense pain. Kair finally started to show signs of life once more, and soon after, astonishingly, got up, swearing and holding his head. They set off. Kair marched bravely at first, then slowed, then slumped down. Geralt heaved him onto his back again and lugged him, grunting, slipping over the stones. Pain shot through his knee, and fiery black bees seemed to flash in front of his eyes.
Just a month ago, Kair moaned from his back. Who'd have thought you'd be lugging me like this?
Quiet, Nilfgaardian. You're heavier when you talk. When they finally made it to the rocks and the rock walls, it was almost dark. The Witcher didn't look for or find a cave. He fell exhausted by the first opening he came across. Human skulls, ribs, pelvises and other bones were strewn around on the cave floor, but, more importantly, there were also dry branches there. Kair was feverish, trembling and shivering. He endured the sewing of the patch of skin to his skull using twine and a crooked needle manfully, and fully conscious, with his faculties intact. The crisis came later, during the night. Geralt lit a fire in the cave, disregarding safety considerations. Actually, outside it was drizzling and a strong wind was blowing, so it was unlikely that anybody was wandering around, watching out for the glare of a fire, and he had to keep Kair warm. The fever lasted the entire night. He trembled, moaned and raved. Geralt enjoyed no sleep. He kept the fire burning, and his knee hurt like hell. A young and sturdy fellow, Kair came around the following morning. He was pale and sweaty, and the heat of his fever could still be felt. His chattering teeth somewhat complicated articulation, but what he said was comprehensible, and he spoke lucidly. He was complaining of a headache, a fairly normal symptom for someone whose scalp has been torn from their head by an axe. Geralt divided his time between anxiously catnapping and catching rainwater dripping from the rocks in beakers he had fashioned from birch bark. Thirst was tormenting both him and Kair.
Geralt?
Yes? Kair tidied up the wood in the fire using a femur he'd found.
When we were fighting in the mine, I was scared.
I know.
For a moment, it looked as though you'd gone berserk. That nothing mattered to you any longer, aside from killing.
I know.
I was afraid,
he calmly finished,
that you'd butcher Skirro to death in your frenzy, and we wouldn't get any information out of a dead man, would we?
Geralt cleared his throat. He was growing to like the young Nilfgaardian more and more. He was not only brave, but smart, too.
You did right, sending Angoulême away,
Kair continued, his teeth chattering only slightly.
It isn't for girls. Not even for girls like her. We'll sort it out, the two of us. We'll ride down our pursuers. But not in order to slaughter them in a berserker frenzy. What you said about revenge that time. Geralt, even in vengeance, there must be some method. We'll catch up with that half-elf and force him to tell us where Ciri is.
Ciri's dead.
Not true. I don't believe she's dead. And you don't either. Admit it.
I don't want to believe it. A gale was whistling outside, and the rain was whispering. It was cozy in the cave.
Geralt?
Yes.
Ciri's alive. I've had dreams again. Yes. Something happened at the equinox. Something dreadful. Yes, without doubt, I felt and saw it. But she's alive. She's definitely alive. Let's hurry. But not to avenge and murder. To find her.
Yes. Yes, Kair, you're right.
And you? Don't you have dreams now?
I do, he said bitterly. But seldom since we crossed the Yaruga. And I remember nothing after waking. Something has ended in me, Kair. Something has burned out. Something has ruptured in me. Never mind, Geralt. I shall dream for both of us. They set off at dawn. It had stopped raining. It even seemed that the sun was trying to find a hole in the greyness enveloping the sky. They rode slowly on the single horse with the Nilfgaardian military trappings. The horse trudged over the pebbles, moving at a walk along the bank of the Sans Retour, the small river leading to Toussaint. Geralt knew the way. He had been there once, a long, long time ago. Much had changed since then. But the valley had not changed, and neither had the Sans Retour stream, which, the further they went, became more and more the river Sans Retour. Neither the Amel Mountains nor the obelisk of the Gorgon, Devil Mountain, had changed. There were certain things that simply didn't change. A soldier doesn't question his orders, said Caille, feeling the dressing on his head. Doesn't analyze them, doesn't ponder over them, doesn't wait for them to be explained to him. That's the first thing they teach a soldier where I come from. So you can understand that not for a second did I ever question an order which was issued to me. The thought of why I had to capture a Cintran princess didn't even cross my mind. An order's an order. I was cross, naturally, because I wanted to taste fame, fighting against the knighthood, against the regular army. But working for the intelligence service is also treated as an honor where I come from. If it had only concerned a more taxing task, a more important prisoner. But a girl. Geralt threw a trout's spine onto the fire. Before nightfall, they had caught enough fish in a stream flowing into the Sans Retour to eat their fill. The trout were spawning and easy to catch. He listened to Caille's account, and the curiosity in him struggled with a feeling of profound hurt. It was essentially chance, Caille went on, gazing into the flames. Pure chance. There was, as I found out later, a spy at the Cintran court. A valet. When we'd captured the city and were preparing to encircle the castle, the spy stole out and gave a sign that he would try to get the princess out of the city. Several squads like mine were formed. By accident, it was my group the men spiriting Ciri away ran into. A chase through the streets began, in a quarter that was already on fire. It was sheer hell. Nothing but the roar of flames, walls of fire. The horses didn't want to go there, and the men, what can I say, were in no hurry to urge them. My subordinates, there were 4 of them, began to claim I'd gone mad, that I was leading them to their doom. I barely managed to wrest back control. We pursued them through that fiery bedlam and caught up with them. We suddenly had them before us. 5 mounted Cintrans, and a bloody fight began before I could tell them to watch out for the girl, who ended up on the ground at once anyway, as the man who was carrying her perished first. One of my men lifted her up and onto his horse, but he didn't get far, for one of the Cintrans stabbed him through the back. I saw the blade pass an inch from Ciri's head, and she fell in the mud again. She was dazed with fear. I saw her cuddling up to the dead man, saw her trying to crawl under him, like a kitten by its dead mother. He fell silent and swallowed audibly. She didn't even know she was cuddling up to the enemy, to a hated Nilfgaardian. We ended up alone, she and I, he continued a moment later, and all around us, corpses and fire. Ciri was grovelling in a puddle, and the water and blood were beginning to steam. A house collapsed, and I could see very little through the sparks and smoke. The horse wouldn't go any closer. I called to her, appealed to her to come to me. My voice had almost gone, trying to outshout the conflagration. She saw and heard me, but didn't react. The horse wouldn't move, and I couldn't control it. I had to dismount. There was no way I could lift her with one arm, and I had to hold the reins with the other. The horse was struggling so much it almost threw me. When I lifted her, she began to scream. Then she tensed up and fainted. I wrapped her in my cloak, which I had wetted in a puddle, in mud, muck, and blood, and we rode on, straight through the fire. I don't know by what miracle we managed to get out of there, but a breach in the wall suddenly appeared, and we were by the river. Unluckily, it turned out, for it was the spot the fleeing Nordlings had chosen. I discarded my officer's helmet, for they would have recognized me right away by it, even though the wings had burned off. The rest of my clothing was so blackened it couldn't have betrayed me. But had the girl been conscious, had she screamed, they would have put me to the sword. I was lucky. I rode a few furlongs with them, and then fell back and hid in the bushes by a river, bearing dead bodies. He fell silent, coughed slightly, and felt his bandaged head with both hands, and blushed. Or was it merely the glare of the flames? Ciri was so dirty. I had to undress her. She didn't resist. She didn't scream. She just trembled, eyes closed. Each time I touched her to clean her or dry her, she tensed and stiffened. I know I ought to have spoken to her, calmed her, but suddenly I couldn't find the words in your language, in my mother's language, which I've known from a child. Unable to find the words, I tried to calm her by touch, by gentleness. But she stiffened and whimpered. Like a baby. That haunted her in her nightmares, Geralt whispered. I know. Mine too. What then? She fell asleep. So did I, from fatigue. When I woke, she wasn't beside me. She was nowhere to be seen. I don't recall the rest. Those who found me claimed I was running around in circles, howling like a wolf. They had to tie me up. When I'd calmed down, I was taken in hand by intelligence agents, Vatier de Rideau's subordinates. They wanted to know about Cirilla, where she was, where she fled to, how she gave me the slip, why I let her escape. And again, from the beginning, where was she? Where had she fled to? Infuriated, I yelled something about the Emperor hunting a little girl like a sparrowhawk. For that, I spent a year locked up in the citadel. But then I was back in grace, for I was needed. On Thanedd, they needed someone who spoke the common speech and knew what Ciri looked like. The Emperor wanted me to go to Thanedd, and not to fail this time, but bring him Ciri. He was silent for a time. Emir gave me a chance. I could have refused. It would have meant absolute, total, perpetual disfavor and oblivion, but I could have declined if I'd wanted. But I didn't decline. For you see, Geralt, I couldn't forget her. I won't lie to you. I saw her constantly in my dreams, and not as the skinny child she was by the river when I undressed and washed her. I saw her, and I still see her, as a woman, comely, aware, provocative, with such details as a crimson rose tattooed on her groin. What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't know myself. But that's how it has been and is yet. I see her in my dreams, just as I saw her in my dreams back then. That is why I volunteered for the mission to Thanedd. That's why I wanted to join you afterwards. I want to see her. Again. I want to touch her hair again. Look into her eyes. I want to gaze on her. Kill me if you will, but I won't pretend any longer. I think I love her. Please don't laugh. I don't feel like laughing. So that's why I'm riding with you. Do you understand? Do you want her for yourself, or for your Emperor? I'm a realist, he whispered. I mean, she won't want me. but as the Emperor's spouse, I could at least see her.
As a realist, the Witcher snapped, you should remember we have to find and rescue her first, assuming your dreams aren't lying and Ciri is really still alive.
I'm aware of that. And should we find her, what then?
We shall see. We shall see, Kaia.
Don't deceive me. Be frank. You won't let me take her, will you?
He didn't reply. Kaia didn't repeat the question.
Until then, he asked coolly, may we be comrades?
We may, Kaia. I apologize again for back there. I don't know what came over me. I've never seriously suspected you of treachery or duplicity.
I'm not a traitor. I'll never betray you, Witcher.
They rode along a deep gorge, which the swift-flowing and wide Sandratur, now a river, had carved out of the hills. They rode east towards the border of the Duchy of Tusar. Gorgon, Devil Mountain, rose above them. To look at the summit, they would have had to crane their necks. But they didn't. First, they smelled smoke. Then a moment later beheld a campfire with spits over it and filleted trout roasting on them. They then beheld a solitary individual sitting beside the fire. Not long before, Geralt would have mocked, mercilessly ridiculed, and thought a complete idiot anyone who would have dared claim that he, a Witcher, would feel great joy at the sight of a vampire.
Oh ho! Emil Regis Rolhek Tetsiev Godefroy said placidly, adjusting the spits. Look what the cat dragged in.
The knocker, likewise called a knacker, koblinau, butcher, polterduk, kakurios, rubetzal or pushteki, is a form of kobold, which nonetheless, the knocker considerably surpasses in magnitude and strength. The knocker, as a rule, also wears a great beard, which kobolds habitually do not. The knocker dwells in adits, vertical shafts, spoil heaps, precipices, tenebrous hollows, inside rocks, in diverse grottos, caves, and stone wildernesses. Wherever it dwells, natural riches such as metal, ore, carbon, salt, or petroleum are surely buried in the earth. Thus, one may often encounter a knocker in mines, particularly abandoned ones, although it is also likely to appear in active ones. It is a vicious scourge and pest, a curse and veritable divine retribution for miners and quarrymen whom the vexatious knocker leads astray. By knocking on the rock, it beguiles and frightens, obstructs galleries, steals and spoils mining equipment and all kinds of belongings, and is also inclined to strike one on the head from a place of concealment. But it may be bribed to curb its mischief-making by placing in a dark gallery or shaft some bread and butter, a smoked cheese, or a flitch of smoked gammon. But best of all is a demijohn of alcohol, since the knocker is extremely greedy for such. Physiologus.